Hi, this is Garrett coming at you with another episode of Produce Your Freedom. Today I'm in the car again, of course. I'm going to expand a little bit on the philosophy of Produce Your Freedom and talk a little bit about the things that do and do not produce more freedom for us. I know we talked about it a little before last time I came at you with a car episode. This time we're going to change it up a little bit, talk about the same items, talk about why those things produce our freedom, and specifically how our freedom is currently typically restricted in those areas, and I'm going to do it from the standpoint of the United States. Primarily, that's where I live, that's what I know. So the survival needs slash ways we can produce freedom that I talked about last time were food, water, shelter, energy, medicine slash health and sanitation, security, and then I added a seventh item of money because we could use it to get all of those other things. And if you notice, over time, all of those do have some level of government involvement. Most of them have a specific agency, if not many agencies directed to them, and those agencies typically restrict us from doing things in those areas. They don't certainly empower us to do more things in those areas. In addition to those government agencies, in some cases there are also other, I'll call them systemic barriers that have been constructed, and I believe that's fairly intentional as well in terms of controlling people to your benefit. So some of the quick and easy ones to think of. Food, of course, we have the USDA, the Department of Agriculture in this country, U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have various local governments deal with the water end. We also have the FDA, jumping back to food, which also ties in somewhere else. So that's your basic restriction on how you can produce food for not only yourself, but how you can make a living doing that, how you can sell to people around you, and things like that. I'm sure there are tons and tons of local agencies and local laws. Luckily, with certain aspects of food, we have started to see, with the popularity of farmers markets and things like that, a little bit of allowance for the small producer. But even still, the organic label, for example, is something that is clearly defined and controlled by the government. I like to buy and eat organic where I can, where it makes sense. Most of what I eat isn't. But there are a lot of local producers who are negatively influenced by not being able to expend the money and resources to get their products specifically USDA organic certified, even though they're probably using practices that are as good or better for us. So that's just one example of government having an influence and a lack of freedom over people's ability to produce and exchange food, which is a basic need. If your food supply is restricted and owned and you can't get around it as easily, then that's certainly affected your freedom. Water is a pretty simple one. Most people are on municipal water, although there are plenty of people on well water. Good step if you are. You control it yourself, but what goes into your water and what comes out of the tap is what most people are stuck with. People drink bottled water as well, but for washing and cooking various things, when we're boiling some food or something like that, whatever happens to be in our water is what we've got. Personally, a quick way around that I use is a Berkey water filtration system. Plenty of people on well water use those as well, sometimes they have some excessive minerals they don't like, or sometimes they just want to make sure that everything's ultra clean and pure. I'm on a regular tap water in an apartment, so rather than drink chlorine and fluoride, which I understand why they're there in our water to start with, I filter them out at the other end. I understand that the chlorine is there to keep the water clean as it travels all the way through the pipes to my house. But once it's out of the spigot, I don't need any chlorine in there anymore, even trace amounts of it. Fluoride, people will say, is wonderful for your teeth, and it is good for them when applied topically, meaning on the surface. When you apply it on the surface in the form of toothpaste and you spit it out, that's great. But people have expressed concerns over actually consuming and ingesting fluoride. It's kind of a toxic substance that's easier to get rid of, apparently, by putting in our water system than by actually disposing of. So I have the fluoride filter set as well for my brekkie. So that's my two of the things that I like to do in terms of the food and water. So that's food, water. Third one is shelter. You'll see a lot with building codes restricting people's freedom in terms of the types of structures they can build. In some cases, in many cases actually, whether or not someone can simply build a shelter to live in without having grid tie-ins or city sewer tie-ins or all sorts of different things. A lot of times building codes make it difficult for people to build alternative structures like geodesic domes and things like that, basically restricting the type of shelter you can live in. And again, that's supposedly for your own safety, but somehow people figured out relatively safe structures to live in for quite a long time before we had municipal building codes. In some cases, it's actually being used to restrict your economic freedom. There are towns that will have laws in terms of minimum construction sizes of homes, which means you're certainly free to live elsewhere, no problem there. But by forcing a certain size home to be built, you're forcing some certain energy bills as well up on the person. You're forcing real estate taxes up on the person as well, because a larger home is assessed for a greater amount of money, and therefore it generates more tax revenue for the municipality. The other thing it does is it makes it expensive to live in a given area, because it creates an illusion, I think, of a nicer area. Just because there are big houses doesn't mean the area is nice or desirable to everyone, but it makes some areas extremely expensive to live in, which really stinks if you're trying to live around your job or around your family and it happens to be in an economically vibrant area, but you would like the personal freedom to be able to spend less money on your housing and set yourself up more securely financially by doing that and all these other things. A lot of times, one of the reasons you may have difficulty doing that, again, is a government agency getting in the way. I'm not getting too political. I'm not talking about Republicans and Democrats. I said in a prior video that I don't really care about that, and I don't. These are just things we should be aware of, and there are steps that once we've identified where the freedom is being restricted and how, we can kind of take a different course of action. We might choose to live in an unincorporated area, or we might choose to examine the building codes and the minimum building sizes and things like that in the areas that we might be looking at living in, to make sure that we don't get ensnared. Another level of restriction in terms of the shelter component would certainly be homeowners associations. Although you choose to live in an area, again, you choose to live in your municipality, you also choose to live in an area where there is an HOA. That's just one more level of government determining what your shelter has to look like and what you can do with your own, effectively with your own shelter, your own property, how your home can look and what you can do to the land as well, which is sort of a part of your shelter. This is my little bubble. So that's food, water, and shelter. Energy, there's tons of environmental regulations, of course, associated with, actually environmental regulations tie into the water aspect as well and the food aspect a little bit, but there clearly are plenty of laws regarding production of energy, regarding things like emissions on our vehicles, all sorts of things that impact how we are able to use and not use certain types of energy and what we end up paying for certain types of energy. There are states with laws that require people who choose to do things like install solar panels. They require the rest of us, in many cases, to to buy that energy from the person who has installed the solar panel at a higher rate. The state sometimes actually requires that at a higher rate than we normally would. So that's what subsidizes the money that people who install them get back from the energy company. That's what enables the energy company to still turn a profit and also discount that person's electrical bill. I'm not saying you shouldn't install solar panels. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not even saying you shouldn't take advantage of that if it makes economic sense and it's something you want to do. Just making people aware of it. So it's food, water, shelter, energy. It's health and sanitation. Of course, the FDA comes back around. Just remember when you see all those wonderful commercials from attorneys and such about if you took this, that, and the other, and you ended up falling over dead or became blind or paralyzed for life or whatever other awful side effects you see, that drug was first deemed safe and effective by the FDA. So they're doing a wonderful job of that, let me tell you. But the healthcare, obviously, the Affordable Care Act is certainly intruded on how we can go about choosing to take care of our own medical needs, and effectively it's saying, well, you can't determine how you want to take care of your medical needs. You must have some sort of insurance that meets X, Y, and Z, and I don't even want to begin to understand most of that, but that requirement certainly is there. We're all living with it. We're all well aware of it. And it hasn't made my healthcare more affordable, I know that much. It's the opposite has occurred. It's certainly become less affordable over time for me. Your experience may vary. It depends on your particular situation, of course. But we are no longer allowed to buy certain types of plans that we used to be able to. Insurance companies are no longer allowed to not provide certain types of services, which I kind of didn't love the system we had before, but you know, I like having a choice in what I choose to buy, and you did have that to some extent before that occurred. So their hands are certainly there. So that's food, water, shelter, energy, health and sanitation / medicine, right? We have all that covered. And security. Security is another one that the government has been in for a very, very long time. That's your police force, right? Security is an interesting one because that's not something where we've totally had an area taken away from us if you can't do X, Y, and Z, other than the, you know, what you can and can't own in terms of personal protection, firearms, and things like that in your particular state, your particular area. But we do still completely, in every single state, have some ability to defend ourselves using a firearm, and there's certainly other ways to ensure your own security. That's not the only aspect of it. There's a lot of things you can do, by the way, if you don't choose to own a firearm or anything like that, to outfit your home in a more secure way, make it a less desirable target, etc. But security is also, of course, something the government has involved themselves in and has tried to present to people as something that is the government's function, right? The police are there to keep you safe. They are, if they're there, and they'll do their best to do that, to respond to incidents as they're reported. But they're typically, unless it happens at the police station or right in front of a police officer, they're typically the second person there. So we certainly do have a responsibility to take care of our own security as best as we can. Also with the realization that for the most part, luckily in today's day and age, and where I happen to be anyways, that my risk of actually needing to take care of that need is pretty low, which is why a lot of people don't think we need to have the Second Amendment. I disagree, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion, I guess. Interesting thing security-wise, in terms of all these needs, these things that we can enhance to enhance our freedoms, right? We can enhance our security, and we become less dependent on police officers. For example, if you don't have any ability or knowledge or plan for defending yourself whatsoever, and something bad happens to you, and you may dial 911, that's fine. That's a start. But you are essentially your freedom to continue to live is dependent on someone else, on who shows up. If you do have some ability to defend yourself, whether it's hand-to-hand or pepper spray or a taser or whatever, stun gun rather, whatever is available in your vicinity and in your area and whatever is legal. I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything illegal ever. In this, that tends to have a negative effect on your freedom. You can get locked up for that. Doesn't exactly give you more freedom. At any rate, as soon as you have some ability to defend yourself, you become less dependent on that. Security, out of all these things, is the one that you can go a very large portion of your life never addressing and be completely fine, if just by sheer luck. Not that I suggest you do that, but as soon as you have a split-second need for it and do not have it, the results are catastrophic. That security aspect, you can live your whole life without it, and maybe you get lucky. None of the other ones have that application, right? If you try and live your whole life without food, you got an issue. Without water, you got an issue. Without shelter, you got an issue from the elements. Without energy, your life's going to be really, 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 really difficult. And even primitive man used some form of energy, fire, etc. You need it to cook. We can't eat raw food. We can't eat raw meat and things like that very easily. So security is a big one for me. It's not one I spend too much time on. You can really go down a rabbit hole with that one, but I believe it should be addressed in today's day and age. In our modern economy in the US, we tend to have decent access to all of these things, but the fact remains that the security side of things is frequently unaddressed by people, and again can have the most catastrophic consequences if you can't address it. If I can't go to the grocery store and get food for 4 days and I have nothing in my house, which is very unlikely for most people that I'm talking to probably, that's going to be extremely miserable and crappy, but it's still okay. You can still just sit in your house for 4 days without food and live through it. That's just not the case with the security thing. If there is a breakdown and it affects you immediately, and you cannot provide security when you need to, you're up the creek, as they say. So all of those areas do have some sort of government influence and control. The idea is that government thinks they can provide for these things. In many cases, they think they provide for them better than you. In many of these cases, I disagree. In a lot of these cases, they want to take away your ability to provide them for yourself, or make it more difficult to, because that increases your dependence on them, which increases the amount of control they have and reduces your freedom. So that's the flip side of why we look at these needs. We know we need them to live. We know we can produce them for ourselves. We know the more we can produce them for ourselves, the less reliant we are on others. But the flip side is there's also a constant pressure to go in the other direction and reduce your ability to provide them for yourself. So something that you do not exercise or do not do is more easily taken away, which is just one more reason to try to produce some of these freedoms for yourself as best you can. So I hope you enjoyed my second part of my philosophy on this. I know I rambled at times, but I'm a little new at this, and hopefully you enjoyed it anyways. This has been Garrett with another episode for Produce Your Freedom. And remember, produce your freedom or life will produce your chains. Have fun on your journey.